Today, on this feast of St. Jane Frances de Chantal, we have an opportunity to recognize the Sisters of Visitation who established a convent in the Diocese of Brooklyn in 1855, 2 years after the diocese itself was established. That convent still exists today. The relationship between St. Francis de Sales and St. Jane de Chantal was one of spiritual director to directee. He became her spiritual director, but also to many other women of his time. It was something rather new in a sense that this was not what was happening in the past. St. Francis de Sales is known to be the father of religious psychology. His spiritual direction was one that reached out to the people of his day and tried to help them living in the circumstances of their life, whatever they were, to become holy. Just like for us today, all of us are called to holiness in the circumstances of our life, whatever they may be. Whether we be single or married or even divorced, whatever it is, we are called to holiness. He directed people to sanctity, and St. Jane was one of his directees who understood his message. Her husband died early in life, and she was left with her children. But as the children grew and were independent, she became and started a religious community under the direction of St. Francis de Sales. The religious community was a little bit different than others. It took the name, the Visitation of St. Mary. The Visitation, what we remember, is when Mary went out to help her cousin Elizabeth when she was pregnant with John the Baptist. She needed her help, and she went out. And so it was with this new religious community. They were not to be cloistered, not to stay in their convents, but rather they were to go out and help people, giving them what they needed to have a good life. And so this order, in many ways, was not so traditional. Also because they were willing to accept people much later in life than most of the religious orders of that day. So we see that we are fortunate to have in our own diocese a convent of the Sisters of the Visitation who promote, they have their own school, but they also promote devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, because St. Margaret Mary Alacoque was a Visitation sister. And Jesus appeared to her and revealed the secrets of his heart to her. Today, on this Friday, we have our devotion to the Sacred Heart. After the Mass, we will have the benediction. And it is reminding us that Jesus asked us to do penance for the sin not only of our own, but for other people. In the Gospel today, we hear about Jesus' strict teaching regarding divorce and remarriage. The Church has continued to honor the words of Jesus both in spirit and in truth. However, at the same time, the Church recognizes that some marriages, as even the Gospel says, were unlawful or were null and void because of something that was lacking in the commitment of the two parties. It's important to understand these, what we call hard sayings of Jesus. They seem to be incompatible with his merciful attitude towards all. But at the same time, he came to establish the law of God. And he says in the Gospel today, in response to the Pharisees, that this was God's law. From the beginning, God made them male and female, and the two should join together and become one in marriage, and no man should ever be able to break that bond. How important it is that we recognize the preeminence of marriage in our church and society. Without marriage, we'd have no people. Without marriage, we have no people who will strive to love God together as husband and wife, who help one another to find God in their marriage. Let us today recognize, as we return to the altar, the role of women in the church. They've done so much to assist children and adults in many, many ways through the various charisms of the different religious orders. They made the church present to so many today. And so we congratulate today the Sisters of the Visitation who may be listening to our transmission today on this feast of their founder, St. Jane Frances de Chantal, who with Francis de Sales have been two great saints of the church who recognize that we live in a world where we must live with the circumstances we have, and in those circumstances find our way to God through holiness.